Hello and welcome to BFS Wargaming. So today we're here to talk about terrain traits and terrain features. I'm really excited about this subject because I love what they've done and how they've not just given you a few types of terrain and then given you what they do. They've actually given you terrain traits, so you can put these terrain traits on the terrain features if you have something that's a bit out of the norm as a terrain feature. You can decide what terrain traits to put on it, or you and your opponent, and decide how that terrain should work. And I think this is really cool, and I love what they've done with this. So what we'll do is we'll jump in and we'll start looking at the different terrain features, the different types. There's 4 different types, so we'll jump in and have a look at those. Okay, so this rock could be considered a hill, which means it's considered as part of the battlefield. So models move over hills using normal rules for movement. Models use normal rules to determine if the model is behind the hill is visible. So still true line of sight is still used for hills, and the hill cannot be attacked. So you don't get any benefits from being near the hill or anything like that. It's just the only thing the hill can do is create a line of sight blocking terrain, and it's considered part of the battlefield. So obstacles, this can cover quite a wide range of variety of terrain features, such as containers, pipes, ruined walls, barricades. Lots of things come under the obstacle ruling. So you've got models can move over obstacles as if they're with your normal move rules. So if you have to measure up and over, or if they're under 1 inch, then you can move across them as if they weren't there. Models use normal rules to determine if a model behind the obstacle is visible, so still the line of sight rules apply. Obstacles cannot be attacked, and infantry, beasts and swarm models receive the benefits of cover while within 3 inches, unless a straight line 1 millimeter thick can be drawn from the attacking to all parts of the target model without it passing over or through this terrain feature. So basically, if you can get around the side of it slightly, and you can get you can basically see all of that model's base, then you will be able, they won't receive the benefit of cover. Okay, area terrain is things such as ruins, craters, woods, forests, things like that. So with area terrain, it has a footprint, and whilst you're on that footprint, you receive the benefit of cover if you are an infantry, beast or swarm model. Models move over area terrain using normal rules for movement. Models use normal rules to determine if model behind an area terrain is visible, so you're still using those line of sight rules. An area terrain cannot be attacked either. Okay, last category is buildings. Buildings are typically units with the fortification battlefield role and the building keyword. Now, buildings are considered to be units rather than terrain features. Models cannot move across buildings. Models use normal rules to determine if a model behind a building is visible, so still have line of sight rules, and enemy buildings can be attacked. So if you have a building, you actually have to assign it to one of either the enemy or yourself, but we will go over something later on to if you didn't want to play a building as a building the way that it is in these rules. Okay, so we have the terrain trait Defensible. So you can give this to many terrain features such as barricades, fuel pipes. You can give it to ruins, ruin walls, all that sort of thing. So what this does is you can, when this feature, terrain feature is charged, you can either do one of 2 things. You can hold steady or you can set to defend. So if you hold steady, so for instance, if these Sisters of Silence were charging these Rivet Marines, they could choose to, when they overwatch, they can hit on a 5+ instead of a 6+, or they can choose to not overwatch but add 1 to the hit rolls in the following fight phase. Okay, defense line. Defense line is given to a lot of things that it also has the defensible terrain trait. So defense line means that when you make a charge move against a unit within 1 inch of this terrain feature, you can fight within 2 inches of it. Okay, so this means these Sisters of Silence are going to charge in, and they make their charge. They have to get to here to make their charge. and then they can fight within 2 inches, because if it was within an inch they wouldn't be within an inch, but they are within 2 inches. So this is how the defense line keyword works. Okay, so the breachable keyword. This means that if a terrain feature is breachable, it has the terrain trait breachable, it means that infantry, beasts and swarm models, so if you have the infantry, beast or swarm keyword on that unit, they can move through this feature as if it wasn't there. Okay, so you can literally, instead of having to measure up and over, okay, so normally you could have to measure up, over, back down, these can just move straight through it like that. Okay, so the next terrain trait is difficult ground. So this is given to certain terrain features such as craters. So this is said to be a little bit more difficult to move through a crater than it would be just normal flat ground. So what you do is you have to subtract 2 when making a normal move, advancing, falling back or a charge move over this terrain feature, unless your unit has the fly keyword. So for instance, if these Sisters of Silence wanted to move across this crater, they would normally have a move of 7 inches, but they would have to then go down to 5 inches because they have to subtract 2, so they can only move up to 5 inches instead of their normal 7. Okay, so the next terrain trait is called dense cover. So you can give this to a terrain feature which is at least 3 inches tall, and it means that to shoot through that terrain feature, you subtract 1 from your hit rolls. So instead of hitting on a 3+ normally, you would be hitting on a 4+, for instance. So this doesn't apply to the models that are shooting through their own terrain feature. So for instance, in this scenario, the Rubik Marines are in the terrain feature, so they wouldn't suffer the penalty for shooting through that terrain feature, whereas the Sisters of Silence are outside of the terrain feature, so they would suffer the penalty shooting into it. And there is no penalty when shooting at aircraft or character models with a wound characteristic of 18+, such as Imperial Knights and things like that, because they are counted as being too big to suffer a penalty for shooting at them, because you're hopefully going to hit them anyway because they're so big. Also to note with dense cover is that if a unit is within 3 inches, so if both of them units within 3 inches of that terrain feature, then neither one would suffer the penalty for the -1. So yeah, if you're close enough, you don't suffer the penalty. But for instance, if both units were over 3 inches and shooting through that terrain feature, you would both suffer the penalty to shooting. So we can cover a couple of terrain traits with this Imperial statue. So the first one is unstable position. So it means that models cannot be set up or end a move on top of this terrain feature, obviously, because it just shouldn't be possible. We also have the terrain trait inspiring. So you add 1 to leadership characteristic of units while they are wholly within 6 inches of this terrain feature. If this terrain feature lists any keywords in brackets, then this bonus applies only to the units that have that keyword. So for instance, for this statue, it's an Imperium statue, so it has the Imperium keyword, so do the Sisters of Silence that are behind it. So they would gain +1 to their leadership whilst they're within 6 inches of it. Okay, the next terrain trait is called exposed position. So this means models do not receive benefits of cover while they're on top of this terrain feature. So for instance, for this armoured container, they wouldn't receive it for being on top of it, but if they were behind it, they would receive cover if they couldn't be if a line couldn't be drawn from the attacker to every part of one of them, at least one of the model's base. Okay, so the next terrain trait is obscuring. Now you can give this terrain trait if a terrain feature is at least 5 inches tall. You can give it the obscuring keyword. So this means that it blocks visibility. So if it has any windows or doors, it means that they block line of sight, so you can't see through them. Models, or if you're in or on the terrain feature, you can be seen. Okay, so if you're inside the terrain feature, you can be seen. So for instance, if these sisters, so neither the sisters nor the Rubik Marines can shoot each other, If the sisters were to move up into the terrain feature, like this, then both the sister could shoot out and the Rubric Marines could shoot in. Okay, obviously this again doesn't work with aircraft or models with a wound characteristic of 18 or higher, because even if the sisters were behind here, now the knight can't see them, but they would be able to see the knight. So this obscures all the way up. Okay, so the knight can't see over it, but if they could draw a line of sight to the knight, then they could shoot the knight. So the next terrain trait is called light cover. Now, ruins are a prime example of something that gives you light cover. So what it does is when you're in a ruin and you're being shot with a ranged weapon, you get +1 to your saving throws against ranged weapons, but it does not affect your invulnerable saves. Okay, so the next terrain trait is heavy cover. Now, heavy cover is similar to light cover, so it gives you a +1 to your saving throw. Again, can't be affected, invulnerable saves aren't affected, when you're in close combat. So if these charge in, these Rip Marines have charged, they hit the Sister's Silence, and then they get +1 to their saving throw because it's counted as heavy cover. Now, the Rip Marines wouldn't get the same benefit if they're inside the terrain because they have charged. So if you're a charging unit, the turn you charge, you won't get that +1 to your saving throw. Okay, the next terrain trait we're going to talk about is called Scalable. Okay, so this is the last terrain trait we're going to talk about. So that will be the full 12. So if a terrain feature is scalable, it means that infantry, beasts or swarm models, or models with the fly keywords, can be set up or end a move on top of this terrain feature. Infantry, beast or swarm models can also move through ceilings and gantries, so they can also move through the ceiling. So for instance, with these sisters, they've got a 7-inch move, and this is 5 inches, so they can move up 5 inches and then move up across 2 inches if they liked. Okay, so that is how scalable works. So I wanted to talk about buildings. So if you've got a building, for instance, like this one here, that you don't want to give a keyword and you just want to use it as a terrain feature, you don't want to give it like make it an enemy model or a friendly model. So what you can do is just make it an obstacle, and then you can give it the terrain traits that you think it should have. For instance, it could have, with obstacles, if you're within 3 inches, you get light cover, as long as you're partly obscured. Also, you could give it, for instance, this one, you can give Scalable, so it means you can get up onto it. It could be exposed position. For instance, if it had a barrier around the edge, you might not give it exposed position because it's got a bit of cover. You might carry on giving it the light cover. So there's lots of different, you can choose. This is the great thing about these terrain traits. You can choose what you would like to put, what terrain traits you'd like to put on what feature, because GW know, we use a wide variety of different terrain in this game, and different models. Some we make ourselves, some other companies make, and you can give the terrain traits to the features that you want and build them how you want and make them work how you want. So I think the terrain traits are an amazing idea. I just wanted to give you an example of how to play a building and play it as an obstacle rather than as a building as in the building keyword. So we're just going to go through the common terrain features and what terrain traits they have. So obviously this is a ruin, and it would have Scalable, Breachable, Light Cover, Defensible and Obscuring because it's at least 5 inches high. So a crater would have Light Cover and Difficult Ground. Armour containers have Light Cover, Scalable and Exposed Position. Okay, barricades and fuel pipes, they have Defence Line, Light Cover, Heavy Cover, Defensible, Unstable Position and Difficult Ground. Battlefield debris just has Exposed Position. Imperial statue, Light Cover, Unstable Positioning and Inspiring with the Imperium keyword. Ruined walls have Defence Line, Breachable, dense cover, defensible and unstable position. Woods have dense cover, breachable, defensible and difficult ground. I hope you found that useful, looking at the terrain traits and how they work, and I hope you're as excited about them as I am and you like them as much as I do. And yeah, I'm looking forward to showing you them in battle reports and how they work and all of those things like that. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, stay lucky, bye.